Hi there, it's Michelle Patterson, and we are here today with the Real Share Daily Huddle. We're coming off a massive, massive weekend where we had Love Fest 2020, celebrated my 50th birthday. It's just been like a miracle after miracle after miracle. I mean, some of the stuff has just been so over the top awesome that we are going to do another day of bringing back our favorites and our best. And I wanted to bring in today is Ian Mitchell, who has been the lead on my wellness team family and with my doctors and working with all the folks that have been bringing this information. One of the biggest comments that we got back was that they loved our content. They said it was invaluable. I've had folks from all over the place, primarily actually in New York, saying, "Hey, I want more of this information, and let's go ahead and get it to us. And I want to talk to your doctors. I want to talk to your wellness providers." We also have Rainey Lynn, who's on, and she just recently changed her name, and I'm going to let her talk about that. But she's coming on, and she's produced Doctors Who Rock, and has just been doing some incredibly brilliant projects, work with me on the California Women's Conference, as well as Love Fest 2020. So I'm going to just go ahead and get this party started. And first, I had said to Ian, right as we were going online, he goes, "That was the best event." And I said, "Hold that thought." Let's go live. And we're going to start with that comment. So Ian, thank you so much for showing up that day.
Oh my God. It was great. Seriously, that was just the most epic meeting of all time. It was hilarious too. I just all-star team, when we wrapped up our session, I turned the video off for a second, and then I turned it back on, and I was in the queue with Jack Canfield talking about love. It was fantastic. And it was great for me because literally his kind of message there rings so true. And it was fantastic. I mean, especially in light of everything that you're conveying and what you're trying to do with bringing people forward and together to share the best ideas on the planet and kind of have everything coalesce so that we can all share and benefit from it, which is kind of running counter to what most things are these days is, the spirit of camaraderie and togetherness and working to a common end is necessary, perhaps now more than any time in my lifetime. And it was fantastic. The message, the core message that I heard Jack saying, which was great, truly for me personally, because it's something I've taught my kids their entire life, is I always told them, and I'm sure if they had seen Jack talking, they probably would have laughed because the you can't have love and fear occupying the same space has been kind of a corner tenet of everything I've taught my kids forever. Because you pick together, right? You move forward in love or you move forward in fear. You're either sympathetic or parasympathetic. That's just kind of the way it rolls. So it was fantastic. I mean,
you've been through so much this last month, even. Definitely you and I have been running, this past year, but this last month, your entire family got COVID-19.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's everybody's doing really well. It's the one thing I've noticed is a little bit of lethargy, just slightly depressed energy levels, little just respiratory issues. And personally, the only thing that's really actually been a physical presentation is just my pulse rate is high, so I'm monitoring that, and kind of classic neurotoxic response almost. Just you can tell that I've got a virus in my system that's kicking out some nasty stuff, and I'm taking all sorts of stuff to suppress it because my personal take was better to get the virus and move through it really well and develop the antibodies, so that in theory I can be more prepared for something down the road. Again, that does kind of coincide with my biggest concern, though, is that I may just be setting myself up for fodder for an antigen-dependent excitation or enhancement, and which is basically, if you already have the antibodies, then the next time you contract something that's similar or kind of in the same type of family, like another COVID or another SARS sort of thing, that you can have a cytokine storm, which just causes a cascade of inflammatory cytokines in your body, and it really damages your tissues. So my personal take is I'm since I can feel it, and I can tell my pulse is elevated, and I also track my pulse ox all the time. I walk around with my pulse oximeter on my finger quite a lot because all the numbers are really good because I'm in really good shape. But lately, I look at it and kind of go, oh, not so hot. But my take is I'm going to just blanket myself with anti-inflammatories that suppress cytokine storms for the next couple of months until we can figure out definitively, where somebody comes out with a really good study saying, yes, you can't get reinfected after you have the antibodies, or no, you can get reinfected. If they say, yes, you can get reinfected, then I'm going to just put myself on a round of anti-inflammatories and cycle them for the next, I don't know, year or whatever it takes until the entire populace has run through this thing, all the mutations have passed, and it goes away for all intents and purposes.
And I want to say to our community of mama bears and papa bears and all those wellness providers that tap into us every day at 4:00, it's okay if you only got half of what Ian Mitchell said. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay, because my family, we literally sit around the table, the kitchen table, which I believe is the heart of the home. And this human, Ian Mitchell, I mean, he's one of the most loving souls that I've had the opportunity to run with, and I'm so blessed.
Thank you.
Every day at 4:00. It's okay if you only got half. Oh, is that? So,
that's the common theme. Is it's really okay if you only got half. So
that should be the title of the entire show. It's okay if you only got half. One of the things that we wanted to talk about during this time together, because Ian has said to me, as one of my close friends, we moved from patient to really good friend to best friends. I mean, he's up there in my Fab Five. He makes it fun. You received the You've Been Shared Award for collaborator, and
Thank you.
that's what I was sharing with Rainey. Is just I told her, I said, yeah, I'd love to have her on the show, because this is somebody who has he's been showing up for so many all his life. And even when you're down, even when you're sick, you're still, you're like, okay, I'm on. I thought you weren't going to be able to join. And you said, absolutely not, Michelle. This makes me feel good when I'm upset. So we're thrilled to have you.
I'm honored to be here. It really is. If I weren't able to use my gifts to help and contribute, they probably wouldn't be my gifts. So
and one of the things I wanted to talk about during this hour is just the courage that you have to come forward. Rainey and I were talking about it earlier today, because we had so many people. I mean, we had over 4,000 when you pull together the social media online live streaming, during that time. And that was something we'd never had done before with this Love Fest. And that doesn't take into account all of the shares that are going to happen with that footage of 18 hours where we just, went forward. And I'd love for you to talk about your segment, which was bringing my wellness team family of doctors and thought leaders and these wellness providers together. But I really feel like we accomplished what we wanted to, and that was showing people it's not about a doctor and a patient. It's about having a team, a collaborative approach where we can come together, where that's how I believe that we create a safety net, not only for the patients, but also for the doctors, so that they feel safe, that they can come forward and say, you know what, this has been working for me and my patients. What do you think about this? And truly that the real share at work. But I could not be more proud presenting to you, our humanitarian, the individual that I feel really embodies the real share and sets up a collaborative moment. Yeah, I mean, it was
Thank you.
really awesome, awesome award to give, because you do it so naturally and so gracefully. So let's talk about that segment during the show.
So I think that the thing that I would like everybody to get, and this is the way you've approached this, and this is one of the reasons that I love you and love the way you deal with all this, is you haven't abdicated responsibility. Because a lot of people, they see somebody, in a white coat, and it doesn't matter if they're a research guy like me or an MD or whatever, they just abdicate responsibility. They look for the person who is the authority. Well, in fact, it's your life, and hence it needs to fit with you and what you're doing. Now, I do, in fact, you take your car to the mechanic if you need it fixed, because maybe you're not an expert at that particular thing, but it still needs to fit with your life. And so you've got guys like myself and, Stephen and Liliana and Q. I mean, there's a whole team of people who have a really varied background. I mean, we tallied it, it was over 180 years of combined study and experience, which is, sounds kind of ridiculous. But the reality is, I think all of us realize that no one person is going to have all of the answers. And especially in this case, we're all just a team that's come together to share ideas and bring forth the best of what we have, but it still doesn't necessarily make it the best for you. In this case, you personally, since we're your wellness team family. So what we try to do is we try and come together, coalesce all of our ideas, get everything to be out on the table. And sometimes, we'll have an idea, like one person said something and I said, I don't really think that's appropriate because of this. And then I put an idea out, and Stephen said, well, this kind of antioxidant behavior works like this. And it's this open share of ideas where a lot of times I find myself in groups or academic circles where people are really very scared to open up because nobody wants to be the person who doesn't feel like the expert. And in this case, I think all of us have a really high degree of professionalism, and we know what we're doing. By the same token, we all know that everybody else in the room is kind of, in your particular case, all the guys on your team, they're all stars. And so we all have a real respect for it. And we try and bring the best ideas, but then pare it down. And the example I went to when we were doing the Real Share was when, I recommended to you that it was time to do radiation. And we deliberated. I mean, the whole team, we all talked about it because we knew that your preference.
I just got to throw this in there because, and Rainey, you'll totally appreciate this, because going from, being on the planet, again, I just celebrated my 50th birthday, and then having this whole entire team, we recorded all these calls, and you have this team of individuals who are all talking about you and your wellness. And when you brought up, and you actually even said, you made the reference, you said, Michelle, we're looking at doing radiation and visualize it as an eraser, on your back. And when you told me that, I didn't get upset. I didn't panic. I didn't feel anything. And again, I've ran, multi-million-dollar organizations. I know what it feels like to feel like you get sucker punched.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that at all, Ian. I literally felt so held on to. I felt like I truly had this wellness team family that when I'm having, which would have been at that moment, a WTF moment, I was fine. I felt very held on to.
Well, and in truth, you were, because we were all coming from the right place. I remember that particular call because it was primarily Stephen and Q and I were on the call, and we were all discussing it, and you had stepped off the call for a few minutes. And we all know your stance on all of the different topics and what you do and what you want to do, and kind of where you lie just in terms of a center, kind of what your true north is in terms of all this. And so,
and just to share with the audience is what I'm looking for, and what everybody is looking for is to be able to provide optimal resources into your body. Meaning that if I am given the responsibility of me, and God only made one of me, out of 8 billion people on the planet, that my responsibility is to get me the best care, the best resources, put whatever is going into my body, it's made with love, out of love, and pull that in. Because I do believe that when we do put things into our body, it is that effect of the placebo effect, where if you are not feeling good about it, and at that time, before I started putting my own team together, you being at the helm and leading this team, I was being told a whole bunch of different things, and it always came up to these three options: chemo, radiation, and surgery. And I wasn't a candidate, as you know, for surgery because it had spread to too many places. So I only had two options, and I thought, that doesn't even make sense to me that we would not have more options available right now in the 21st century on this planet.
And I'm glad you went with your gut, because you're entirely right. And there are more options, but again, that gets back to, surgery, chemo, and radiation. In the US, it's standard of care. And that's what everybody has to do, because if you deviate from standard of care too greatly, you're kind of going out in the realm of not covered by malpractice insurance. And then it puts you out as, kind of the lone island, trying to defend your position. And if something goes amiss or awry, which in biological things happens, you can't control every single thing. Every time somebody eats something, there's a different interaction. Every time somebody drinks something or, walks outside and the ozone parts per million are slightly different in the air, it impacts your physiology. And so it's difficult to control that. And so everything is kind of covered under the auspices of standard of care. And as long as you stay under that umbrella, you're covered, right, by kind of the powers that be, the establishment. And unfortunately, we're getting to a point where cancer is too prevalent. It's right now it's 1 out of every 3 women, or 1 out of every 3 men, and 1 out of every 2 women, I believe, is the current.
Actually, it's one.
Oh, is it reversed? I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
they said before it was 1 out of 2 men would get cancer, and then 1 out of 3 women would get cancer. But now you have, basically, we all have dis-ease in some form.
Yeah, it's not so hot. It's too prevalent. I mean, the rates, either way you slice it, I always think of it as leaving my kids in a classroom, right? How does the rate equate if I leave my kids in a classroom? Would I leave them there if somebody said, listen, there's a 1 out of 3 chance that you can come back after school and pick up your kid and they'll be fine. 1 time out of 3, they won't be fine. And I really do. I think of it like that, because I view every life as truly very critical. It's important, to your point, there's only one of you, right? And you're in charge of that person. You're responsible for that person and bringing forward all the gifts given to that person to hopefully for the betterment of humankind. And with rates that are 1 out of every 2 and 1 out of every 3, whether it's men and women or women and men, that's not an acceptable loss to me. A 33% chance or a 50% chance, those are really bad numbers. So, but there are other options, and you search them out. And, luckily we run in the same circles. And I think, we're brought together for a very definitive purpose to get the ideas out so that everybody could see where we're going and see what's happening, and we can share this. And now, I mean, case in point, we have a mutual friend who went with therapeutics that I know aren't really your bailiwick, but she did a combined therapy with the German protocol that you're working on, in addition to some light targeted radiation and some chemo. And 5.5 months after the fact, she's completely fixed, much to the surprise of every one of the oncologists she worked with. And she's great. And,
that's so awesome, because
it was fantastic, actually. I love getting those texts.
And I'm not going to mention names because it's their story to tell. However, I will share this, is that, I mean, there's not a day that it goes by that I don't have somebody reaching out saying, I've got cancer, I've got this, I've got this. Well, lo and behold, and I know so many people that very, very, very close friends. And so I had been asked, will you go with me to find out what stage I'm at, and the advice of the doctor. And that's where, when I went in, again, it was chemo, radiation, surgery. I mean, it was the weirdest thing, because I brought up in the meeting, and I started asking in the meeting, the doctor appointment, I brought up and I said, what's your recommendation for food, what are you suggesting? And they had zero response.
Mm.
And I think it's unfair for us to go in there with the mindset of expecting a response when we have to, at this time, be able to pull together our nutritionists, pull together our doctors, pull together our, because again, it's so complex, the body, and you and only you can say, hey, this is working for me, this is not working for me. But as it relates to this food, so I know you've been working with my nutritionist Liliana and over at New Center for Medicine, and also Dr. Keneally. I mean, it was absolutely awesome because I was able to get you on the phone with my other doctors and all of us get on the same page. And that was one of the comments that Keneally had said is the only page we need to worry about is the patient page. And
Yeah.
I thought that was a great way to say it. When you look at what Rainey has been doing and the work that she has been doing, I wanted you to talk about this, Rainey, because I would love for us to put it out there amongst our community and tell them these are the conversations that we're starting to have about coming together, whether it be a referral program, because we want to keep this going. I mean, if I can go ahead and provide this content out daily, and we have situations that are happening. I mean, you won't believe this. I mean, literally, we have the Love Fest event, and then my phone started blowing up. A lot of New Yorkers, and I think it's because they are going through the COVID-19 virus.
Mhm.
Um, many of them are being faced with that and really looking at how to navigate through that. But I did get some responses back saying, I want to be in contact with your wellness team family. I want to talk to Ian. I want to talk to, I mean, you're our celebrity. You're our hero. You're
Well,
our,
I'm here to help. So I
that's
don't know about hero, but I'm definitely here to help. So
Well,
So, Rainey, talk to us about the work that you've been doing with Doctors Who Rock and why you're so excited about bringing the Real Share and Doctors Who Rock together, and why the award was coming out. And I mean, all this stuff is so exciting
yeah,
because we were able to give an award to Kelly Gallagher
yeah.
for the work that she's been doing for decades.
Right. So I think a good place to start is to say, number one, just to comment on what you guys were saying, we are complex human beings, and it's going to take an integrative approach for us to stay healthy at all levels. That's that 5 areas to thrive. But it's also, what are we doing about our emotional health? What are we doing about our nutrition? What are we doing about, all of those parts of us matter. They all work together. And I think everybody's starting to really see that. I feel like the world's really waking up to that. So it's a great time for that. As far as Doctors Who Rock, I mean, these are kind of, we put this award program together. Kelly Gallagher, it's her brainchild. She's a 5-time cancer survivor, thriver. And these are the doctors that she worked with, just like you. She went through her own journey, wanted to share her story about these doctors. But some of the doctors that we've been able to award are people like Joe Mercola, Ty Bollinger, Truth About Cancer, Chris Shade, who's a scientist and a biologist with Quicksilver. Some of the real, and then some of the pioneers. Yes, Dr. Keneally, Leanne Keneally. I mean, but some of these guys are really pioneers who started this movement and really said, hey, we've got to look at medicine as a whole. There's an integrative approach, and there's things that we're not doing. And the use of nutrition and emotional healing and things like that are being used and having great results, but they're not talked about. So I think that's the beauty, is we love to bring together everybody that you're bringing together in the Real Share, all these patients, and just create a funnel where we're introducing them to your doctors, our doctors, your doctors become award winners in our field. It's really about sharing the information that there are options, there are other ways to have your journey and to heal on more than one level. So I'm really excited about the two.
I love what you're saying too, because it's about us showing up with our area of specialty. and you talked about it earlier. There's zero competitiveness when we pull these doctors together, and they're in, there's like Ian had said, there's 180 years of experience. Nobody showed up with ego or pushing anything or product or trying to sell anything. I mean, it truly was what's best for you, Michelle.
Yeah.
And also they were answering questions. I mean, I had my girlfriends calling in and talking to people. It's like literally from the hospital. I'm on the phone with Ian.
It cracks me up, Rainey. You just mentioned, I literally, before we started the call, I was emailing Joe Mercola because we're working on a new of some stuff.
He's amazing. He's a really great man.
I just find it funny. It's kind of, the world gets very small sometimes, I think.
It is. And it's amazing how before I met Kelly, I knew nothing of these doctors. And now it's like, I see how you'll notice that all of these doctors, whether they've known each other or not, once they realize they're on that same path and that same journey, it's like band of brothers together. They're supporting each other, and they really just have a heart to see people heal. And doesn't matter what way, how, what, and it's just a really tight community. So I'm excited about bringing the Real Share and Dr. Surak together, and just, doing our best to get these different options out to the world, because there are options.
There are options. In your particular position, you have a platform that you can start to disseminate that, because I think every doctor I know, without fail, wants to help people, wants people to heal. Remember Michelle, the person that just got rid of their cancer and is now from stage 3 down to stage 0. I remember where you guys were, and I remember where I was standing when you called me that day, because that was the appointment where you went to get that diagnosis. And the doctor's office where I was standing when you called, those guys they're fantastic, and we all refer patients and references and researchers to one another, because everybody wants people healed. And the people who are really paying attention realize that the system is fundamentally flawed. And you've all heard me say it, right outside of my door: fix the people, break the system. It's the heart's in the right spot. We just have to massage the system a little bit to get it back. And I mean, Rainey, if your platform is such that you can do that, beat that drum.
Well, yeah. And again, I get to support these amazing women. So somehow or another, I got lucky enough to join Kelly and to go on that journey of creating that event, Dr. Surak and Get Your Life Back Now. And then I got to meet Michelle. And then it was like, just being able to bring these two people together. They're women that have been through the same journey, but they're at a different place in their journey. And just to be able to bring these powerhouse geniuses together, but also to realize that we have to do this in a different way. We have to talk about this conversation in a different way. We have to bring this to the people in a different way, because of the way the world is right now, and because of how things have been set up in the medical community. And I think that we've got the right people on board to really be able to do that, to get past some of those barriers and share this information and get it out there without it being censored or blocked or stopped. Because at the end of the day, our wellness is our responsibility, and it's my body, and I should have the choice of how I choose to treat it and do whatever I want to. That's part of the freedom, that we want to be able to have. And I think this is part of it. So I'm excited that I get to bring these two women together and these missions, and that we'll get to work together to really spread this out.
I think too.
Okay, so
same lines. I wanted to say too, is when you did bring us together, I mean, it was just this true admiration for one another, and very similar to what Ian talked about. When you bring geniuses together and it's in their essence, Felicia talks about this a lot when she was on the show. But when you're doing your essence and you're just in your God-given talent, it doesn't feel like work. People ask, they're like, how did you do 18 hours on live stream the other day? And I said, because I was in my essence. I was in my genius. I was loving on life, and life loves you back. And when you brought us together, It was the same synergy that I had with Ian. It was, I am a spoke in the wheel. You know, you eat your spokes in the wheel. And then when we come together and we do our genius, there's no competitive, there's no, it's just like, how do we get this done? And let's pull it together. And it's way more fun doing it together. And I do want to talk about the comment that you had, and that is, you know, when we make decisions out of love and out of really, really stepping to support one another in this humanitarian outlook of really supporting each other so that we have a safe playground. We show up in love and not fear. We show up for each other, and we're not running scared, and we're definitely not worried about anybody coming along because we're collectively doing this project together. And Ian, you're part of my family. I mean, we have, this family is growing and growing, and I look forward to Tuesdays when I could just.
Yeah, I do too.
I love that. I mean, just because I'm like, you know what, we have the answers to the test, and we have individuals that absolutely want to show up in their genius and help out and want to really be forthright in the information that they've uncovered. And when you talk about this, Rainey, I feel like it's this is where we're at. I think this massive reset with COVID-19 has allowed us to really step into our true nature and be our true self and do our essence. You know, I didn't have to run that event. You know, we had Rose Tafoya, who is a total rock star.
Yeah.
Who came in, and she ran the event. She's ran my last, you know, decade of coming in and doing the programming. And so we've got these powerhouses that come together and just shine, and it's effortless.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Really, in the most literal sense. You know, for me, it's joyous. Literally, it is joyous. It puts a smile on my face. I was at the university where I go down and work with one of the professors pretty frequently, and I asked him, because all the students are gone, the place is closed, and he's been working on COVID-19, which is the only reason he's allowed to go into the biolab. And so he actually had to petition and write letters so that he could go in. And so we were talking, and I said, you know, if you had your druthers and you could do anything in the world, what would you be doing right now? And he just got this kind of quizzical look and said, this, man, I wouldn't do anything other than this. This is what I love to do. And it was so refreshing, because that's exactly how I felt. It's the same thing. I mean, I don't know what else I would want to do, is, you know, solve these puzzles, help people, disseminate information, get the right information out there. I mean, Michelle, just in the time that we've been working together and we've known one another, the technology has advanced exponentially. You know, there are better therapeutics. And the thing, and Rainey, this goes to your point about being in a position where you can get people together and then share the knowledge. So much has happened just in the past year in terms of, you know, cancer therapeutics and things like that. Different, you know, people looking at, you know, T-cell therapies and G-coupled protein receptors, and, you know, the therapies with the guys out of Germany that I work with all the time. There's brilliant technology, because there's a whole world filled with genius people with really big hearts who just want to solve puzzles and help people. And what we need is a platform to be able to speak from. And, you know, and I think that it still goes back to the individual person. Like Michelle's team, we all work together, we all know one another, and we know that at the end of the day, everything we have to put together needs to go through the filter of, is this the best thing in the world for Michelle? And if it passes that litmus test, then it goes to the point of, okay, now we talk to Michelle about it, you know, which is, and the example again is the radiation. I mean, we noshed through that because we knew that wasn't your preference. But at the point at which we brought it to you and said, okay, so here's where we're at. We think this is the best thing for you. There was not a flinch, not an ounce of any reservation, because you knew we were coming entirely from a place of love, where it would have taken a bullet for you at any moment, because we were going to offer you the best knowledge, the best resources, and we would have done it for our, you know, our mothers, our wives, our daughters. Wouldn't matter. That's the best result we could possibly provide. You know, not to say that it's, you know, perfect, but it's truly, if you approach it from a standpoint of, you know, I love this person dearly and I would do anything for them, that's where we're at.
That's the difference, though. The difference between what Michelle's going through in her journey right now and the journey that Kelly went through is that most people go to their insurance and they go to one doctor, and one doctor is taking care of all of their needs. They're and they may not even be looking at the person from an integrative standpoint, whereas Michelle has a genius in nutrition, a genius in this, a genius in that, a genius. And so they're looking at her as a whole and how it all works together, which is the most important part as far as I'm concerned. I teach a personal development workshop called Essence of Being, and I'm a true believer that if we don't process our emotions cause create or add to the disease in our body. Some of these doctors that I've worked with, and I've gotten to experience it, a treatment called EVOX, where it literally goes in your brain and it maps where the trauma is and where it's trapped, where it's connected to the organ in your body. And it's like, there's just so many different things that we didn't know about ourselves and how they all fit together. So it's like each one of them are so important. So the genius, that a real genius, is that wellness team family. Like, hey, bring in more than one team member so that we can help you heal in all these areas, because it all makes a difference. It all connects.
Michelle, I think what you did that's different than what most people do is because, Rainey, to your point, there are a ton of us out here who have lots of insight. We spend, 15 hours a day researching, studying, working on this stuff, or in my case, in a lab and actually trying to figure out things, testing things. Michelle did something that was revolutionary. She asked. And generally speaking, if you ask someone, they will help.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here, is simply because you asked. And, I think if more people didn't abdicate responsibility, but they took the onus on themselves and said, okay, so this is the diagnosis I received. This is the prognosis I was given. I'm not okay with that. This one I have to deal with. I'm going to figure out how to spin it so that I end up in the right place at the end of the day, and take that and run with it. Then, if somebody comes to me from that standpoint, which is how Michelle came initially, you're never going to go, no, I'm too busy. You'll find a way. You'll find the time. I mean, Michelle and I talk at wackadoo hours. And it's true, I mean, for my time, Central Standard, sometimes, 3 a.m., whatever. That's okay. I'm happy to do it. Really, truly happy to do it. In great part, it's because of the way Michelle presented, because she didn't blow it off. She didn't abdicate responsibility. She took it and said, okay, I'm going to own this. I'm not okay with where it's at, so I'm going to move through it. Mm-hmm. And additionally, I do have to say, one of the things, and this is kind of interesting, that I'm personally working on in the lab right now is a lot of effects that are just not, kind of my background from chemistry. It's not so much that we're looking at the chemistry behind things. We're actually looking at, and as much as I dislike saying the terms quantum behavior, what we're finding is that things aren't actually communicating solely biochemically. There's a whole cascade of electrical impulses. And then when you look beyond that, there's an oddball cascade of photonic impulses, just lights, like in mitochondria. There's all these little femtosecond pulses that allow the mitochondria, I think 4 quadrillion of them, to communicate throughout your entire body all the time, which is unbelievably cool. And that was only discovered, last year, maybe 18 months ago or so. And then beyond that, we're starting to see things like, to your point about the emotions that are stored and trapped. Well, all of those physical manifestations come from some specific loci where they have a vibration, just like a hologram would, right? It's an interference pattern where there are waves that coalesce and interrelate. And when things are dysregulated, whether it's emotional, chemical, biochemical, electromagnetic, whatever the stressor is, it sets up a dysregulation of sorts. And you can see the manifestation of that. So it's interesting. Your point, I think it's really neat, because what I've been looking at for the past couple of months is, how do people actually get dysregulated? Because if you really want to fix somebody, Michelle, this stuff that I mostly tinker with is just biochemical stuff. But if you really want to fix a person, you have to look at where the root of the issue is. And it is, after having dealt with so many people, there's an uncanny coincidence, because I don't really believe in coincidence, that people will have very specific emotional issues and then will manifest a problem in that same physical locus.
Yes.
And it's overwhelming.
Yes.
I mean, as long as you don't go, that can't happen, therefore it can't happen.
We
and I just don't believe it.
We store anger in our liver, right? I mean, when you look at it, and when sadness is grief in our lungs. I mean, this is Louise Hay, some of her work that a lot of people thought was woo-woo. It's not woo-woo. It's science.
Well, it's science fiction, then it becomes science.
Emotion, and it's like, it's a real thing. I mean, they're literally, I have spoken with, through the Dr. Sirach experience, I have got to speak with patients who literally only changed their nutrition and did emotional work and have healed completely just from those two things. Now that might have been their mix in their cocktail. It might take a mix of something else, but it's like, that's the whole point, is that we should be able to get to mix and choose and pick what works for us and have a team and look at all of those areas. And I think that's the real bigger message. It's not just a one-time fix it thing. It's a lot of different pieces all together.
Well, with regard here for Michelle, since this is the only person we can really speak about here, I'll talk about myself and what's ailing me. But Michelle, since you've already shared everything that's going on with yours, you had to adjust your diet. I mean, that's why Liliana works on it. That's why, because that was one of the biggest cascading factors that rolls down to everything, because you can't simultaneously put out the fire while you're pouring gasoline on the same fire. You know, and in your case, when you've got active metastatic cancer and it's spreading and finding different points to move to, you can go through all the methods that we did to suppress that so that it doesn't continue to move, and then decloak it from your immune system so that it's able to be found and eradicated.
Why don't we share some of those things? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the things that's so great about actually being the one that's going through this, is that I'm free to share what I share.
Yeah, your personal experience.
Right.
Share my experience, because, you know, and we've talked about this before, is, you know, people get quieted, they get shut down. And for me, I said, you know what? I made a deal with God. And I said, I am going to go out there and put this wellness team family together. And I'm going to figure out other options that are on the planet. And I'm going to heal. And I'm going to do the gifts that God gave me. And that was the deal that I made. And then I was going to come back and I was going to share it with everybody. So let's talk about what those steps were. And this is the time too where we want to give a shout out, because we have the ability to answer these questions. And we've got folks that are coming online to ask questions. And so each week, you're on Tuesdays at 4:00. And so that we can get some consistency, because people can call in and ask these questions and get real live answers from you. And that's what they want. They want to be able to have the real share. They want to have information that's coming from a trusted advisor.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share every bit of info that I have. And
I love that. I love that about you. And so when it metastasizes, what are some of the things that is related directly to nutrition? Because that for me was the hardest thing. And I share with you, I'm still throwing up, and it's partly because my system, I'm very sensitive to anything that I put into my.
Well, in your case, with one of the particular therapeutics that I know you're taking, it's one of the side effects is nausea, but it's a relatively mild side effect when you look at the kind of the cost benefit analysis of what can we do to inhibit the spread and what can we do to actually knock it back? Because in your particular case, the one agent that caused the nausea, 3 days in, you noticed a regression of, the swelling and the masses, and it wasn't just an edemic response, meaning just a swelling in the tissue. It was actually cells were going apoptotic and, dying, and that's exactly what we want inside a tumor.
And I love that phrase too. Apotopic.
Yeah, it's apoptotic. Yeah.
Say it fast 3 times.
It's going to be my rapper name, apoptosis. So I think one of the big things was going on the ketogenic diet. That was a huge component, and I've seen that in all the clinical studies that I did, working with lots and lots of animals, and I've seen it in people, and it's kind of a consistent theme because the idea is cancer has a glycolytic metabolism, which is just the sciencey way of saying it burns sugars primarily, right? So even when there's a presence of oxygen and it could go into the Krebs cycle and be far more efficient, it doesn't. It backs off and goes with burning sugar as its main method to get fuel. And there's a whole host of reasons why it does that. Some of which are very definitive and everybody agrees on, some of which are still kind of theoretical. I have my own particular take on that. But the ketogenic diet is a cornerstone because it has been correlated in terms of its shunting of just the basic energy that the cancer uses to progress. Simply if it lacks the fuel, it's not going to be able to move as quickly. Mm-hmm. So, you want to do things. That's why anti-angiogenic therapies are so big, is because that's angiogenesis is when a tumor creates its own blood flow. It's vascularizing. It's building vasculature. And you try the anti-angiogenic approach because you want to negate its ability to vascularize and get blood flow and pull in nutrients. Because cancers are generally nutrient primal, meaning they eat first. They'll pull in the nutrients that they need to grow, and they also have a couple of odd things that the ketogenic diet really helps you with. Because if you have a really low balance of your glycogen stores in your liver have been depleted and you don't have much circulating sugar, then it simply doesn't have enough fuel to really keep moving. And it generally will keep moving, but at a much lower pace. And sometimes that's it. That's all it takes is, just the one modification. And, if somebody's, say, stage 1 and they have not very aggressive cancer, but a mild form, then it can just roll back and that's all they need. And Michelle, I just got my cookbook yesterday from.
I would love for you to talk about this. You have to. Woo! Great story. All right, so pull that back up. Let's see that.
What do we want to see?
No sugar
for Manfred. Yeah, and it is beautiful. I mean, look at this stuff. These guys, they did such a fantastic job of it. So with these guys, they're in Germany and they're following a protocol with a doctor in Germany, and I've been working with them on a couple of different components. And so we were really drilling down on the ketogenic diet. And Alpi, who's Florian, is the patient, or as he's listed in the book, the fighter, and Alpi is the cook. And so Alpi called me and asked me more questions and texted me and asked me more questions than I think I've ever received from anyone on diet, the specificity of diet, and in true, very German engineer fashion, just over the top specificity. And she would just constantly hit me with questions and, little, very, very subtle, nuanced details. And I thought, oh my God, so it took, a lot of time. I responded to everything and then I didn't hear from her. And then she comes back and has all these developed recipes, and they were fantastic. She very rapidly became an expert.
Well, they were so fantastic that we ended up chatting, and we've been going through WhatsApp. And so that was the next step, is they wanted to have the cookbook back. So now I'm going to go online. I can order it through Amazon.
Yeah.
Get it back. But what's so interesting is, here, other parts of the world, we were experiencing the real share at work. And what Ian was doing was he was comparing my logs to his log, and he had brain cancer.
Yeah, glioblastoma multiforme. Yeah, which is not a really fun cancer to have. Yeah.
I mean, is there any fun cancer to have?
No, but there are some that are really ungood. And I'd say a very aggressive pancreatic cancer and an aggressive glioblastoma multiforme are probably arguably the worst two cancers you can get, because there's not a terribly good prognosis if you get that. Generally speaking, people that have GBMs or glioblastomas, there's about a 5% rate of survival after a couple of years. It's not terribly likely, because normally what happens is they'll develop some sort of brain tumor, usually an astrocytoma or something that's a lower grade. And then sometimes they'll have that treated, they'll remove it surgically, which is why Flo has that giant question mark scar on the side of his head, because he actually had the surgery and had it removed. But then the astrocytoma progresses and the cells morph, and then it becomes a very aggressive glioblastoma. And they truly are. They grow at just an unbelievably quick pace. And the problem is you can't remove all of the cells because it interlaces throughout your brain. So you can do targeted radiation and you can do chemo and all those things, but it's not really good. A friend of mine is on the actual. Well, he's off the board now, but he was on the board for the glioblastoma group in the U.S. And I was saying, well, there's at least a 5% survival rate, and he said, hang on a second there. He said, it's not discussed much, and he's a doctor. He said, it's not discussed much, but that's a genetic predisposition. The reason there's a 5% survival rate is it's a genetic proclivity that some people have that others don't. And I didn't actually know that. It was a little bit depressing because that means that basically the majority of the time, it's unless you have those specific genes encoded, you're kind of hosed. And it's not so good to hear. But
well, the last PET scan, and this is what is so exciting again, is it's a combination of doing different things, and you were able to go ahead and compare what I'm doing, what other patients of yours are doing, and then you were able to come back to me and say, Michelle, we just had huge success with his cancer, the brain cancer, dropping 57%.
Yeah.
And you were equally excited because after 3 days of taking what you were having him take, I called you and said, I'm noticing it. I mean, I can physically, or
yeah, you could palpate it. Yeah.
Or my husband.
Yeah, palpating breast cancer is generally, it has another term. I forget what that is, but whatever. Yeah.
There's a lot of love going on. and
Are you sure there's a change? I should check again. Are you certain? Yeah, and that's the thing. Well, yeah, in Florian's case, it was 56% in 7 weeks was the reduction of the GBM. And that's surprising. He said that when he went to the oncologist is usually a very flat, kind of grim German doctor who never smiles. And he said when he went in after the PET scan, the oncologist was beaming and very curious about what he was doing and his diet and how it was working. And that's the thing is I'm lucky in that because I do work on a lot of different teams with a lot of people, I have access to a lot of records and I can see what everybody's doing. And because I'm sort of a correlation nerd, I like to look at what made a difference. And sometimes you'll find something. I mean, I remember with exactly what you're talking about right now. I remember sitting in my office, going through records over the weekend and going, oh my God. And it wasn't just 2 patients. It was, a couple of patients across a couple of continents on different cases that I had been brought in to look at, which is, I love the fact that people actually call me and want my perspective on things. And so, I try to drill down and treat it as if it were, somebody in my family, because it's no secret I've lost people in my family to cancer, and that's kind of what pushed me to really study it. In great part is I'm just not okay with the way things are because it's grim. And so when I was looking at the correlations, one of the fellow's cases, he was a doctor in the U.S. and I called him and I said, hey, you wouldn't by chance be looking at this and taking this and prescribing this? And sure enough, he was. And then, everything lined up across all these different domains. And so, when you started doing it, same thing, just immediately kicked in. And the fantastic part about that is in this particular case, the medication was a whopping $23. So
right. Yeah.
Well, and I love this process too, because we're showing up and we're talking about, people ask me, it's like, well, what are you doing different? I said, I don't know if I'm doing anything different other than, to your point, I'm asking for the help. I'm connecting the dots with individuals. We're really showing up with no judgment, no stigmas, just what are you doing? This is what I'm doing. Let's share the information. that we have. Let's share testimonials, from individuals that are experiencing it firsthand. And that's what got me so excited. I mean, when you called, I was with my husband, we were having lunch, and I put you on speaker, and I had the last conversation was that I was going to start the radiation.
Focused radiation. Yeah.
Radiation. And then you said to me, Michelle, we have another option, and this is what's been happening. And after doing, your real share, and we both started crying, Eric and I, because I knew at that point, it was like, okay, Ian is onto something, and he's putting these pieces together. And that's truly what it's about. We don't have to overcomplicate this. We don't have to make it a struggle. We simply need to share the information that we have with each other. And in doing so, what happens is I think you do fall in love with yourself, because you are creating a safe environment. You're standing up for yourself, saying, you know what, I'm not going to settle for anything less than optimal. What's optimal for me? And encouraging and giving others the same permission to do that for themselves. And I think that's the beauty in the real share. That's the beauty in how you show up every day, and just being like, you know what, whatever information I have is yours. Let's share this. And so one of the things that we've brought Rainey on board is to set up our referral program, because I could not believe, Ian, how many individuals were coming back just on watching Love Fest. We're saying, I would love the opportunity to meet with your team. I'm going through stage 4. I have this, issue that I'm actually having to navigate through. And so that's what this is about, is just how can we come together. And one thing I'll say, I had been asked, somebody had said to me, well, what are you doing on your wellness, sabbatical? What is it that you've been doing? And my husband chimed in and said, well, she's working. And I said, well, correction, because I can't tell the difference between work and my passion and my play. I'm similar to you, Ian, and Rainey. Is that
joy? You never want to stop when it's your joy.
It's my joy. And so for me, it totally lifts me up. I wait for this time. And so with that, we've got so many things to happen. Check back with us, everyone, on Tuesdays. Please put your questions together. You can talk directly to Ian, because we want this information out there, and we want to personalize it directly to you. So with that, we are going to rock this up and dance like we normally do. Welcome